Welcome to the Connect Your Health to Life coaching podcast. I'm your host, Seth Lusk. I'm a master certified life coach and published author with a decade-long background working in the health, wellness, and fitness industry as a personal trainer, nutrition specialist, and life coach. If you're anything like me or the clients that I work with, then you might be struggling with some confidence issues or struggling with feeling like you're not living your most fulfilling or authentic life. You may be trying to figure out why you have these amazing desires for what your most fulfilling life would look like, but you can't seem to create consistent action in your life to reflect those desires. So join me as we dive in deep on what it means to truly live a fulfilled and authentic life from the inside out. We're going to look from the perspective of an empowered mindset and uncover some of the reasons why you might be what's holding yourself back from living that most fulfilling life. But don't worry, this isn't about blame, guilt, or shame. This is about empowering you to see. I'm going to break through some of the biggest illusions and myths that we've all been taught to believe along the way. And I'm so excited to have you with me on this journey. So my only question for you is, are you ready to start living your most fulfilling life once and for all? Then let's get started, shall we? Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you listening in for the first time, welcome. Really glad you're here. As usual, I'm going to say you picked an interesting episode to join in on. This is the third part of a 3-part series on emotional pain. So if you are joining in for your first time today, well, I'm very happy you are here and listening in. I'm going to ask you to pause this episode and go back and listen to the past 2 weeks' episodes before you listen in today, just because I think it's going to be very helpful for you to understand what we're talking about today and why we're talking about it once you've listened to the first 2 parts of this series. So today, we're talking about emotional pain again. So far, we've talked about numbing behaviors in the first part of the series, which is something that I see so many people struggling with today. And I talked about the reasons why we struggle with it, what they look like in people's lives, and the various ways they can show up, and how you can begin to recognize it in your life if you're doing it, and what you can do about it. Then last week's episode, we talked about the concept of pain. Just what is pain? Where does it come from? How do we experience it? Why is it that we're so afraid of pain? And today, the third part of the series, we're talking about acceptance of pain. So today is about what can we do with all of this information that we have about pain and our human desire to avoid it. Today we're going to do a little bit of review, a very quick review for everyone. We're going to talk about some of the current strategies that humans are using when it comes to dealing with their pain and how they are harming us, and then what we can do instead. What do we want to do with this concept of pain? How are we going to re-empower ourselves when it comes to the fact that pain is a very real thing in our life? Our life is, as I always say, it's 50-50. There's going to be 50% that we love, we enjoy, it's fun, it's great, it's happy. And then there's the 50% where we're not enjoying ourselves so much. It doesn't feel so good to us. And what I've been trying to get you all to recognize is that those parts of our life that are the 50% that aren't the great, I want us to begin to re-empower ourselves by embracing those parts of our lives, because they're there for a reason. They're here, they are a part of the human experience, and resisting those parts of the human experience is what's creating so much of the suffering that we see now. And this is the case when it comes to pain as well. Now, when it comes to pain, we can be talking about 2 different kinds of pain, really. We have physical pain, and then we have emotional pain. What's surprising is that they're not so separate from each other as you might think. You see, when we experience pain, and we talked about this a little bit last week, whether it's physical or emotional, it occurs in the brain. Without the brain, the identification of pain would not occur. Even when it comes to physical pain, it starts as a signal from a nerve that's a stimulus that's occurring, and it sends this signal of a sensation to the brain to be interpreted. The brain then interprets the signal that there is pain. And what is interesting about pain is that it passes through a few different parts of the brain for interpretation. One which associates a story of pain with the stimulus. So not only do we have the physical sensation of pain, but then there's another part of our brain that's telling this story about the signal of pain and what it means. And along with this story, when the brain is telling the body that it is experiencing pain, it throws in this signal of fear of pain. And I want to talk about that a little bit today and why this is so important to pay attention to, because pain is so closely associated in the brain with fear. And that's something that we need to recognize. And we're going to talk about why that's so important to recognize later. What's interesting, though, is that the level of the story of fear, or the intensity of the fear that the brain creates in that story surrounding the pain, can vary from person to person and from stimulus to stimulus. And this accounts for why some people appear to have a higher pain threshold. This also accounts for why sometimes when we experience pain, we're willing to just be like, okay, that hurts. And then other times we have these huge reactions to it. It's also why some people go from, when they're a child, falling down and scraping their knees, and they turn into this screaming and crying mess they're acting like they're dying, to when they're adults, they can fall down and scrape their knee and then just grab some disinfectant and a Band-Aid and be like, okay, well, that just happened, that sucks, and move on with their day. This is the reason why. It's because it's not that all of a sudden as an adult the person doesn't experience as much pain. It's that the story surrounding the pain is not so intense and there's not such a strong fear response associated with the pain. The brain learns over time with falling down and scraping the knee, okay, this isn't a huge threat. The knee's going to heal itself. We just need to put a Band-Aid over it, try not to scrape it anymore, take care of it, clean it, and it's fine. It's going to heal itself. All is good. We're not about to die. So, as I just said, this powerful fear response, that's where it comes from. This powerful fear response served us many, many years ago, but this was because many years ago, pain meant that something was probably trying to kill us. There was a real threat or danger. And also, millions of years ago, falling down and scraping your knee could have been something that killed you because we didn't have antibiotics and things to clean out the wounds. So you very likely could have died from an infection falling down and just scraping your knees. So our brain over millions of years has learned to create a very strong fear-based story surrounding pain. And what's interesting is that same fear story surrounding pain is now what's killing us in more ways than one when it comes to how we're processing our pain. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to last week's episode for more details on that. But basically what I'm talking about here is our buffering behaviors, such as overeating, overdrinking, or trying to numb ourselves out emotionally with watching television, shopping. There's so many different ways we can do this to try and distract ourselves and numb ourselves from our emotional pain because we're afraid of this story that we have surrounding pain. And the story usually involves something about the fact that it's going to kill us, which sounds ridiculous, especially when we're talking about emotional pain. But the brain doesn't know the difference. The brain doesn't know the difference between emotional pain and something is biting off your leg, you need to get away. Pain is pain to the brain, and the brain has the story of fear surrounding pain. So what I want to get us to notice today is that this same fear around pain that our brain has evolved to create to help us survive is now actually what's killing us, because it's causing us to go into all of these different very destructive behaviors that cause actual physical harm to us, our bodies, and to our emotional health, all for the avoidance of pain. When we talk about, for instance, the pleasure of eating was something that served us thousands of years ago when food was scarce. And moving away from the pain of hunger was something that served us. So the comfort of food, the pleasure of food was something that we wanted to seek out constantly. But now that pleasure is everywhere. And the pain that we're trying to escape is not pain that's out there. It's not actual dangerous pain that's going to kill us. It's emotional pain. And we associate food with comfort, with getting away from that pain because of that drive to constantly eat, to stay away from dying. Because of this association in the brain, we associate food with comfort. And so now we use food to buffer away all of our emotional pain, and emotional pain is part of our life, and food is everywhere. So we see how it's creating so many different ways in which people are becoming sick from the fact that food is available everywhere, and our brain drives us to constantly seek comfort and pleasure over processing our emotional pain. So for the sake of the podcast episode today, I've already talked about the fact that this involves physical pain and emotional pain. Today, I want to focus on emotional pain. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about here today, if you suffer with chronic physical pain, Many forms of it can be managed with the same ways that I'm going to talk to you about managing your emotional pain. Even if, and sometimes it can actually eliminate the chronic pain, but even if the chronic pain can't be eliminated, say it's from a source such as some kind of cancer or an actual injury, even some of the things I'm going to talk about today will help with reducing the intensity of your experience of that pain, which already provides so much relief. But for the sake of the podcast today, what we're focusing on is emotional pain. And like I said before, if you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes, I'm going to say you're probably going to want to pause the episode here and go back and listen to those and come back and listen to this, because this is the 3rd part of a 3-part series on emotional pain. And hearing these first 2 episodes is fairly essential to understanding and applying what we will talk about today in this episode, because I'm going to allude to a lot of things that I talked about in those previous 2 episodes, but I'm not going to go into the details of them. And so you might get a little bit irritated or frustrated listening today and be like, that's not true. And, in the previous 2 episodes, I explain a little bit more surrounding these concepts, how they're true for us, so you can see it more clearly and have a little bit more acceptance in what I'm going to be talking about today, and be able to understand what I'm talking about today a little bit clearer and move into the acceptance part, which is what the goal is of today's episode. Because the goal of this episode is that I want to talk about what it is that we want to begin doing when it comes to our emotional pain. Our way of viewing pain and approaching it now is what's harming us in so many ways. And I've been saying this for some time now, that the next step in human evolution is going to be one mainly in the mind, in the brain. It's not so much a physical adaptation. It's going to be about those who choose to shift out of paradigms that we're currently living in our life into one that enables us to see our biological drives and see them for what they are, and see them for the ways in which they're harming us now, and be willing to step into the discomfort of growth in that area, of actually overcoming and pushing against our own biological drives. The next step in evolution is going to be about learning to understand the capacity of our mind to begin using the brain and mind for us, instead of feeling used by our brains in our lives to try and accomplish its biological drives, like seeking food at all costs, like seeking comfort at all costs, no matter what it is. And one of the biggest ways that we can accomplish this is by looking at our approach to pain, especially emotional pain. Because here's the thing, as I said in the previous episodes, the pain that we experience predominantly today isn't these survival pains, one where we're trying to get away from something that's going to kill us. We're trying to escape our emotional pain. And what's crazy is, when it comes to emotional pain comes from our beliefs and our thinking, and we're trying to escape from the source of it out there into ourselves, which is actually where the pain exists, where we are creating it. So I want to talk today about the current ways that most of us are handling emotional pain in our lives, and then talk about how these are not serving us and why, and then what we can do about our emotional pain to serve us. But before we do that, I think that there is something really important to distinguish here, and that is, I told you we're going to talk about emotional pain and not physical pain today. That's the focus of the episode. But I think it's important, before we dive into emotional pain, to understand a bit of the difference in the experience of physical pain versus emotional pain, and putting these 2 pains into perspective for the sake of also emotional responsibility. And you might be scratching your head about that, but here, let me explain. So, physical pain, when it comes to us talking, and this is something I teach my clients when I talk about the thought model. So we have circumstances, we have thoughts about the circumstance, these thoughts create emotions, these emotions create actions, and then the actions create results. So when we're talking about physical pain is a circumstance in our life, most of the time. Sometimes physical pain can be the result of emotional pain. And after a period of time of experiencing this pain due to our emotion, physical pain begins to appear in the body because of our resistance to the emotional pain. And then after a period of time, this becomes chronic pain, and then this becomes a circumstance in our life. But physical pain in general, so like if I fall down and scrape my knee, if I break my ankle, if I break my hand, if I get bit by something, if I get stung by a bee, these physical pains are circumstances in our life. And remember what I say about circumstances. All circumstances in our life are entirely neutral until we have thoughts about them. And this is not about saying that we're not allowed to have thoughts about these experiences and have emotions based on them, but this is to re-empower you to recognize that you are the one in charge of that. And sometimes we want to be angry about things. Sometimes we want to be sad about things. But the important thing is to recognize that you want to do that and that you are creating that experience. The circumstance is not creating that experience for you. And that's so important to recognize, because then you can get to the reason why it is that that emotion is so important for you to experience in that moment. What is it there to teach you? So when it comes to physical pain, it is a circumstance and it is entirely neutral until we have thoughts about the circumstance, with which then bring in these stories of judgment based on those thoughts and the circumstance. And from this, we form emotions surrounding the circumstance. And unless we are aware of this taking place, what often happens is that we give our emotional responsibility to the circumstance and we become disempowered in our life, and then we become emotionally reactive when we don't understand why we feel completely out of control of our emotional experience. And this is important to keep in mind when we talk about both physical and emotional pain. With physical pain, it is a circumstance of a nerve in our body, or a set of nerves in our body, sending a signal to our brain about what is going on in the body. And it is usually a signal to let the brain know that something is amiss or something needs our immediate attention. The brain then interprets this signal with the signal of physical pain. And, we talked about this earlier. It comes along with a signal of fear. And I'm not saying that we entirely have a choice in this interpretation. If you fall down and scrape your knee, you don't want your brain to not experience that as pain. If you have your arm ripped off, you don't want your brain to not experience that as pain. This is important to experience pain there. So this isn't me saying okay, mind over matter, it's not painful. We want to experience pain. We talked about this in last week's episode. Pain is a powerful signal to let us know that something is going on in the body that needs our attention and needs protection from either further damage or possibility of death. So this interpretation isn't always something that we want to or have a choice over. But oftentimes, what we are taught to overlook is our power and our choice in how we experience and deal with that physical pain. As I said, physical pain is a signal designed to warn us of potential danger and harm in the body. It is there to let us know when damage to the body has occurred, so that we can protect those parts of our body from further injury and allow it time to heal. So ignoring that pain is harmful to us. Not experiencing that as pain is harmful to us. And there are people in this world that actually their brain does not interpret the sensation of pain as pain, and they're in constant danger. Because as I talked about last week, they could be running their hand under scalding hot water and all they feel is a sensation. They don't recognize it as pain until they look down and they see their hand blistering and turning red, and then they might pull their hand out of the water, but by then the damage is already caused. So we want to experience pain. The goal of this episode is not to talk about how to not experience pain. It's how do we experience it in a way that empowers us. And this is where our power comes in. Because as we talked about, the brain uses the emotion of fear to drive the signal of pain within us as being urgent. And the original purpose of that is to get our attention quickly to avoid possible danger. But here's the thing. In this episode, we're talking about emotional pain. With physical pain, yes, sometimes there is danger that we need to get away from. Pull your hand away from the burning hot stove. Take your hand out of the scalding hot water. Take your hand off of the knife that you're accidentally cutting into your hand while you're cooking. These sensations are there. They're supposed to be urgent. But at the same time, when it comes to our emotional pain, nothing there is going to kill us. But the brain treats it in the same way as physical pain, if we don't tell it to do otherwise. If we don't recognize that desire for the brain to be like, this is painful, fear, 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 get away, get away, get away, with the same amount of urgency that it would if you had your hand on a hot stove. And so our power comes in not in the fact that the brain is going to experience the sensation of pain and say, hey, this is painful, I need your attention. That's not where we have our power. Our power comes in once that signal reaches the brain. We notice ourselves moving into fear of the pain, and then we have the ability, the emotional responsibility to step in and manage the experience. Oftentimes with physical pain, we exacerbate the sensation of physical pain with our story of fear surrounding the pain and then our resistance to it. It intensifies the pain. And the same happens with our emotional pain. Because of the brain's habit of fearing and therefore trying to get away from pain, this is now harming us rather than serving us when it comes to emotional pain, and sometimes even with physical pain, when it comes to chronic physical pain. And the brain can get stuck in this habit of experiencing pain to try and avoid certain things in life. It's almost like a protective mechanism. And we can see this both in chronic physical pain, but it's even more obvious when it comes to our emotional pain. The brain gets stuck in this habit of fearing emotional pain to try and avoid, or to get us to avoid doing things that are uncertain for it. It's all about that protective mechanism in the brain. It just wants to keep you alive and safe. And to your brain, emotional pain is just as much of a threat as physical pain, so it will try and get you to avoid it through things like the buffering behavior that we talked about 2 weeks ago. And this is really important to look at. Our brain's habit of fearing pain and creating more emotional pain and fear surrounding it in order to get us to avoid things in our life. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later as far as this habit and this biological design for fear of pain. But for now, I just want you to recognize that that's there. And that sometimes this serves us in the 21st century, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time now, it's what's creating more pain for us and creating suffering for us. And what I'm here to say today is that there's something we can do about it, but the first thing that we need to do is recognize that it is not pain itself that is creating this. It is our brain's reaction to pain, and where that reaction comes from, and why our brain is using the drive of fear when it comes to pain, and how this being driven by fear is what is creating a lot of the issues that we're facing now. And it's a total lack of awareness that this is what is going on that is creating a lot of the issues that we're facing as humans now. Without awareness of this, when we experience pain, what often happens is that we increase the intensity of our pain with our fearful thinking surrounding the pain. And when it comes to emotional pain, this fearful thinking about the emotional pain causes us to behave in ways that increase the pain and prolong it with buffering behaviors that we talked about in the first parts of this series. So our thinking about the pain signal can either intensify the signal of fear and therefore intensify the vibration of pain, or we can de-escalate the fear surrounding the pain and soften its vibration. But where most of us are is in this unaware state of our ability to do something here. So what we do is we cycle into fear and we ramp up the experience of our emotional pain with that fear. And I want to be clear here that this episode is not me, this is again not me saying that we should not be experiencing emotional pain. I want that to be very, very clear here. This is not me saying that emotional pain is supposed to feel good for us either, or that our goal is to not experience the emotional pain in a way that is painful for us. I'm not saying any of that. This is what I'm wanting to say here, is that I want us to begin to pay attention to how much our thinking has power in our experience of pain, and that our experience of pain is what's causing us problems now, not pain itself. And that when our brain feels out of control, it brings in fear to ramp up the intensity of any experience in its attempt to seek control. And with pain, the brain does the same thing. Emotional pain and physical pain. It seeks to control through avoidance and shrinking. And unless we tell it to do otherwise, this is what the brain drives us to do when it comes to our emotional pain. Now, we talked about how physical pain is experienced, how it starts as a nerve in the body sending a signal to the brain, and then the brain interprets it as pain and goes through its various ways of signaling to us, this is pain, get away, get away, get away. When it comes to emotional pain, something a little bit different than physical pain happens. And this is important to know. Emotional pain happens when we have thoughts about circumstances in our life, even about our physical pain. Yes, we can create emotional pain to compound our physical pain when the physical pain is a circumstance in our life. But emotional pain happens when we have thoughts about circumstances in our life that produce emotions that we perceive as painful. And we tell ourselves all sorts of stories about these emotions and how painful they are and how we shouldn't be experiencing them and how they're wrong and bad and we need to get rid of them and, never experience them or get out of them as fast as possible. Resist, resist, resist. And when we have these emotions that we experience as painful, what happens is the brain then sends a sensation out into the body of the same pain and fear surrounding what would be like a physical wound. And the brain goes about immediately seeking the source of the injury. And it's looking outside of us because it's trying to get you to not pay attention to where the pain is actually coming from. It's trying to get you to avoid the pain and get away from the pain. So it's getting you to look around, look around, look around. And what often happens is we end up looking in our environment for the solution for what is causing our emotional pain. The brain wants to know the source of the quote-unquote emotional injury so that it can avoid it. But when it comes to emotional pain, what creates the wound is our own thinking. It isn't something outside of us. It's our thoughts about what is happening outside of us. And the thoughts happen inside of us. But the brain treats it the same way. And here is where so many of us go about creating these cycles of habitual emotional pain. Because we search for the source of the pain outside of us and in an avoidance of the pain. And then we want to avoid the source. But here's the thing. Remember, the source is us. And we avoid looking at the true source because we don't want to be in the pain long enough to recognize the true source. So in physical pain, the sensation starts in the body and then goes to the brain. And with emotional pain, it's in the brain and then it goes out to the body as sensations out in the body. But here's the thing, in both cases, the pain and the fear surrounding it is created and experienced entirely in the brain. And that's not to say that the pain is not real. I know sometimes I talked about this last week where we use this phrase, oh, it's only in your head, as a way to sort of diminish the experience of things or to dismiss it. Of course it's only in your head. That's how we experience life, is through our brain's interpretation of things and then how our mind goes about making sense of it. But here what's important to recognize is that we have some power here. We have some dominion because it's taking place in our brain. The processing of pain, especially, and the development of emotional pain, it's only happening in the brain. In one, the source of the pain is a physical injury, and it comes from something that happened or from something outside of the body. So looking out for the source serves a purpose. But when we fear speaking in front of a crowd, and we're nervous, and we're afraid of that painful experience of getting up in front of that crowd and speaking in front of them and possibly stumbling on our words, and then we fear that and we start to get stomach pain. The pain is created and experienced in the brain from the thought about you speaking in front of the people. The stomach ache doesn't come from the crowd or from the people or from the circumstance of getting up and talking in front of people or from something that you ate. It came from your thought about that experience. And I know in the moment it can feel like it's coming from the stomach, but the pain is coming from the brain and your thoughts about that experience. It is important to know the difference here between how physical pain and emotional pain is started and experienced. And it's also important to recognize the brain's ability to create pain in the body due to emotional pain. And recognizing this is so important in order for us to get to the true source of our pain. And arriving at the true source of our pain, which when it comes to emotional pain again is our thoughts and beliefs, arriving at this is what gives us our power back in our emotional experience with our emotional pain. This is not about changing thoughts really quickly to get out of pain as fast as possible. I know that a lot of people, when they hear that, oh, okay, so my thinking is creating intensity to my pain, so I just need to change my thoughts. This is not the goal either. This is about awareness and empowerment. We don't want to create a life in which we're just here to eliminate pain. Pain is important to experience, both physical and emotional. It is our fear and avoidance of it that is harming us now, that is creating the suffering that we're experiencing now. The pain is here to help you. It's here to help you find what is truly harming you. And with emotional pain, what is truly harming you is your thinking. It's not what the other person said. It's what you're thinking it means about you. Because the truth is, and I've used this example so many times before. If someone walked up to me and said, "Seth, I absolutely hate your pink hair," I would have zero painful thoughts about my hair. I would feel zero emotional pain. If my best friend came up to me and said, "Your pink hair is hideous, you should change it," I would have zero emotional pain about it. I would actually worry more about my best friend and their eyes because I don't have pink hair. I have not a single thought in my head that supports the fact that I have ugly pink hair because I know my hair is not pink. Now, if you have pink hair, you can change the color to another color in that story. But this is important to experience or to know. What is truly causing the harm and the hurt when it comes to our emotional pain is our thought about it. Now, if my friend walked up to me and said, "Your gray hair is making you look so ugly and old," I might have some emotional experience there because I know I have gray hair. And I know I'm getting older. I'm getting close to 40. So I might have some emotional experience there because of my thinking surrounding it. And the thinking might be an emotional experience about myself. And some of that might feel a little bit painful at first. But if I go about thinking that it's my friend saying that about my hair, I'm going to go and blame her. And be like, it's your fault. You shouldn't have said that to me. And I don't want to be friends with you. And I can't be around you. And then I just try and avoid everybody who talks about my gray hair because they're the problem and their cause. Instead of me looking at the fact that what's actually harming me is my own thoughts about my gray hair and the fact that I'm getting older. That's what's causing me the pain. But when we try to avoid pain, we never get to see the true source of it. When we try to hurry through it, instead of living in that pain and being present with it, what we end up doing is trying to rush through it and avoid it. And we create suffering, and then we keep recreating the cycle of it over and over again because we never got to the true source of the pain. So what I want to talk about at the end of this episode is what we can do when it comes to pain to stop doing this. But before we do, let's talk about the 3 tactics that most of us are currently using when it comes to our emotional pain and how they're not serving you to create what it is that you think that you're creating by doing this. And then we're going to talk about what to do. So here are the 3 major harmful tactics that the brain tries to use to convince us to take action when it comes to our pain. Number 1 is resistance. There's this idea, I would rather feel pleasure than pain, and why is that a problem? Or this idea, I shouldn't have to feel pain. I should be able to just feel pleasure instead of pain. Or the idea that pain is bad. I should not have to experience it. Or the idea that I'll just choose to feel pleasure and buffer and numb myself to not experience the pain. And here's the thing, my friends, I need you to understand this isn't an either-or circumstance. It's not either you feel pleasure or you feel pain. If that was true, I'd be like, hell yeah, seek pleasure, do it. You'll never experience pain. But it's not an either-or situation. When we resist pain, what we're doing is trying to numb ourselves, but the pain is still there. It's not either or. Just because you're seeking pleasure to avoid your pain does not mean that you actually avoided the pain, and it doesn't mean that the pain is gone. The pain is still there. So it's not, I'll just experience pleasure and then not experience the pain. That's not how it works. If I thought that was how it worked, then I would just be teaching you all how to constantly seek pleasure and then be like, yeah, you'll never have to experience pain. But pain is part of the human experience, my friends. No one gets to live this life without the experience of pain because that's part of the deal. And we want it to be part of the deal. The more we resist that part of the deal, the more suffering we create for ourselves surrounding pain. But as I said, you want to experience pain. Without it, pleasure, happiness, joy, they don't really exist to our brain. It's kind of like if I were to write an O on a white piece of paper in black ink, I can only see the O because of the white paper surrounding it. Without the white paper surrounding it, If it was just black ink on black, I wouldn't be able to see the O. The O wouldn't exist. It would just be what is. It's part of what it. So I need you to understand that without pain, we also don't experience pleasure, happiness, and joy. Without pain, we don't experience the stimulus that's necessary to get our attention to avoid future injury. And I mean this also with our emotional pain, because emotional injuries are real, my friends. They're not something to just brush over and pretend don't exist. They are real injuries that are harming you over and over and over again the longer you try to avoid looking at them and finding their true source and processing them through and finding your power in creating that pain. And the longer we do this and avoid seeing the true source, the longer we keep re-injuring ourselves. So, my friends, pain is something you want. And numb does not mean that you are not experiencing pain. And being numb does not avoid the injuring or the damage that this is causing to you. In fact, you're probably doing more damage without even realizing it because you don't know the source of the pain in the first place. You might be able to achieve some temporary sort of obliviousness and start creating harm in your life everywhere you go by pushing people away from you because of this obliviousness to the source of your pain. But that's going to create pain too. And the lack of pain in your life, if you didn't experience pain, like I said, there would be no contrast that allows you to truly experience and enjoy pleasure, comfort, joy, happiness in life. We wouldn't truly be able to appreciate the experience of joy, pleasure, love, and comfort in life without the presence of pain. And that's important to recognize. And I know that some of you believe that you would rather just pleasure yourself all the time rather than pain. And you think that there might be nothing wrong with that. But as I said before, it's not that you can experience pain or buffer it away or pleasure. Like I said, it's not an either or type of scenario. Just like most of everything in life, either ors don't really exist in this life. That's a big illusion that we buy into in so many different ways. But this is one of these situations in which either or is not the case here. It's not either pain or pleasure. It's both. That is the human experience. And choosing to try to experience pleasure now when your brain is trying to process pain doesn't get rid of that pain. The pain is still there and waiting for you on the other side of that hit of pleasure. And it's going to need more of your time to process because you're ignoring it and intensifying it. And so then you need more of the pleasure in order to avoid it. And thus we see the compounding effect of our pain and the suffering and also the damage that we're doing to ourselves with all of these buffering behaviors that I talked about in the first episode of this 3-part series. You choosing to try and experience pleasure over your pain is only intensifying it by trying to resist it. And then you still experience it later, along with the experience of the pain of constantly resisting it along the way. Which brings me to the second strategy that most of us are taking when it comes to our pain, and that's delaying. Which, I just want to say this here, delaying is very much the same as resistance, but it's slightly different. So it comes from this idea of, I just want to delay the experience of pain as long as possible. I don't want to deal with it yet. I'll deal with it later. I'm not ready for it yet. I'll just keep pushing it off, and I'll deal with it later. There's this idea that we can deal with the pain later. But here's the thing, delaying it, first of all, it doesn't make it easier to process later. You compound it, you add to it, you increase its intensity by resisting it in the process of delaying. It's really, delaying is the same as resistance, but with the intention of eventually we'll get to it, whereas with total resistance, it's thinking you're going to get out of this life without ever dealing with it. With delaying, though, you're not actually... What's crazy is that we think we're delaying our experience of pain, but you're not. You're actually prolonging your experience of pain. Remember that with emotional pain, it's coming from a thought that you have. And just because you're avoiding looking at that thought, just because you're busy stuffing your face with food or alcohol or watching television or shopping or busying yourself at work with projects, just because you're doing those things in an attempt to delay the processing of pain, it doesn't mean that thought just went away. It's still there in your brain. It still exists in your brain. And it just keeps running on repeat in the background of your life, creating more and more pain in all of the areas of your life that it touches as you keep trying to avoid it and delay it. And it will be running on repeat, taking up energy from you, slowing you down, and creating this constant low-key vibration of pain in the background. And it is back there just collecting more and more evidence of its truth. And you just keep attempting to delay it. But in the process of doing so, this is resistance. So you're just continually intensifying it in the background until eventually, and this is where you see these explosive actions in people that don't really match up with the experience around them. It comes from this concept of thinking you can delay pain. You're not delaying it. It's still there, still running in the background. You're still experiencing it, and you're adding to it in the process. The truth is that you are not delaying your experience of it. You are simply prolonging it. So this idea, I don't have time to process my pain. My friends, until you process your pain, you are taking up a ton more of your time trying to hold it in the background and you think you don't have time to process your pain. I promise you, not processing your pain is taking up so much more of your time and energy. You don't recognize it because you think you're delaying the experience of it, but it's still running in the background, taking up so much of the bandwidth in your brain. Taking up so much energy of resistance in your body and in your mind. If you don't have time to process it, my friends, trying to delay it is just creating more time of experiencing it and processing it. Delaying it doesn't create less time. It creates more time. You're still dealing with it right now. If you think you're delaying it, you're still dealing with that pain right now, whether you are choosing to or not. And by trying to delay it, all you're doing is allowing that emotional pain to affect more and more of your life with greater and greater intensity. Remember, the purpose of pain is to ask us to pay attention. It wants you to pay attention to the source and find out its danger to us and our survival. And when you try to delay and resist, you never allow the pain to do what it's there to do, which is to give you the chance to find the true source and the damage that it's creating in your life. And so it will just keep intensifying and going and going and going. And as this intensifies, this is why a lot of times the constant attempt to suppress and resist emotional pain will manifest as physical pain in the body, as the brain tries to figure out how to cope with this and where to find the source of it, because you keep looking out there. Instead of letting your brain know, no, this is a thought that we're running that's creating this pain. And what's interesting is that this becomes actually a source of a lot of chronic physical pain that people start to experience. And I see so many people these days going to their doctor with these chronic physical pains that have no diagnosis. And a lot of times it's because it's coming from this suppressed emotional pain. That the brain is like, I don't know what else to do with this signal of pain that you're not dealing with, you're not finding the source of, and it keeps coming back. So there's got to be something going on in the body that's wrong. And so the brain literally creates pain in the body to be like, okay, that's the source of it. That's where it's coming from. But then there's nothing going on there. And what's interesting is that a lot of the pain medications prescribed when it comes to chronic pain, what they actually do is they treat the way the brain interprets pain. They don't eliminate pain. They don't even go to the site of the pain and change the way the nerves are responding to the pain. No, they go straight to the brain and the processing part of the brain that processes pain. And it changes the way the brain processes pain there to a different interpretation. And this is also why so many people with chronic pain or that take painkillers from like a massive injury become so addicted to painkillers, is because this medication also helps to change the way the brain perceives emotional pain. But that pain still exists after the medication wears off. The emotional injury still exists after the medication wears off. So you need more and more and more of it to change the brain's experience of the pain as you keep avoiding the source of it, and the brain keeps intensifying it. And as soon as the medication wears off, it's right there waiting and ready for you. And so people become addicted to these medications to the point where they are no longer able to function in society because they're actually using pain medication to avoid their emotional pain. It's really interesting to see how this works. How emotional pain and physical pain tie together, and how our resistance to pain because of our fear surrounding pain is creating a lot of problems for us. And now that we've got pleasure available everywhere, we've got pain medications available everywhere, All because we think that somehow we're going to escape it, escape the experience of it. But my friends, I'm here to tell you, no one gets to do that. We don't get to escape the experience of pain. You can take pain medication all you want to try and escape the experience of it. You're going to experience the pain of isolating yourself in your life, becoming non-functioning, pushing people away as you constantly medicate and medicate and medicate. That's also painful. So this brings me to the last tactic that I want to talk about today that we're using now, that we want to stop using. And what feels a little bit sad for me is that this is also a tactic that I see many coaches out there using. And so while I recommend finding a coach to work through emotional pain with you, to find your path through it, I want you to be careful when finding a coach, because a lot of coaches use this next technique or this next tactic when it comes to dealing with pain. And it's the tactic to get out of pain as fast as possible. Try to solve it. So emotional pain only comes from our thinking, so let's just get in there, find the thoughts, and change them really quick. Let's change the thinking really quick to hurry up and get away from this pain. And while that might seem logical on the surface, all we're doing is resisting the truth of those thoughts and beliefs. Why did we create them? We never understand, why did we create them in the first place? What were we trying to protect ourselves from? And so then what we end up doing is just recreating those thoughts in other areas of our lives in different ways and recreating that pain again. So again, we never find the true source of the pain, the illusion behind the thinking and the beliefs, because we're hurrying up and just, oh, that's the thought creating the pain, change the thought. And there are a lot of coaches out there that try and sell programs to people to hurry up and move them out of pain. And what I want to suggest here, my friends, is that you don't want to rush through your pain. And for you coaches out there that have the same approach, I feel you. I want my clients out of pain too. I don't like seeing my clients in pain. It's not fun to watch them in pain. But you trying to hurry them through their pain does two things. Number one, it disempowers them, because they then see that they're not able to handle pain, that it's something they need to hurry up and get through because they're too weak to experience it and be in the human experience of pain. Number two, you rush them through their authentic process of finding the true source of their pain. And so what ends up happening is they'll just be right back where they are now, wondering why the work that you did with them didn't help. So the last urge, this path of action to hurry up and rush through pain and escape it as fast as possible, or what some people might call pushing past the pain, which often happens in outright denial of the pain or diminishing the existence of it or dismissing the existence of it. Trying to be like, oh yeah, that's nothing. That's just go away. With internal talk. Or I see people just busying themselves with other goals in hopes that the pain will go away. I know so many of you out there want to hurry up and get out of pain. I know. Trust me. And here's the reason why. Remember, it goes back to that fear of pain. The brain is telling you, fear, 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 get away, get away, get away. So I understand it. But I need you to understand why this biological drive to hurry up and get out of pain is now not serving you. It's actually creating more harm for you than good. And it's the reason why you feel stuck in these patterns of emotional reactivity and emotional pain, and you don't know how to re-empower yourself in your life. It's why you feel like your life is shrinking around you to the point that all that's left that exists is this pain. Rushing through pain in a hurry to get out of it is still resistance to it, my friends. It is saying that the pain is wrong and shouldn't be happening, and that you're somehow too weak to be present with it, and so therefore you need to hurry up and get out of it. And this doesn't serve you. Remember, without finding the true source of the pain, then it will still be running in the background, even with your resistance to it, gradually increasing its intensity, increasing the vibration of it in your life and your body, and then out into all areas of your life, spreading the pain everywhere and creating suffering for you. So the question is, what do we do with pain then? When we notice it in our life, if we don't want to avoid it, if we don't want to delay it, if we don't want to resist it, if we don't want to rush through it, how do we experience the processing of pain in a healthy way? So the first thing we want to do is create awareness of how much our fear of pain is causing our reaction to avoid it, to numb it away, to distract ourselves from it, to delay it. How much does the story surrounding fear of pain, including your inability, your fear that you're unable to process it, how much does that cause you to rush through the experience of it? Pay attention here. Create awareness here. This is so important. I think journaling about this is a massively helpful practice when it comes to the experience of pain, journaling about your fears surrounding the pain and understanding that those fears are what is causing your current cycle of constant rebirthing this emotional pain over and over again, and it becoming more and more painful for you, and you creating more and more suffering in your life as you keep telling yourself that this disempowered story that you can't deal with the pain. And so you keep trying to push it away and push it away and push it away, and it keeps coming back stronger and stronger. So once you've done some journaling around understanding just how much your experience of pain is intensified, how much of the suffering you have surrounding pain is intensified because of your story of fear surrounding pain, how much do you tell yourself that you're unable to process pain and that it's a problem and that it's something that you need to get away from? How much do you do that? I want you to write about that. Then the next thing that I want you to do is when you're in the experience of pain, and you can recognize, okay, right now this pain feels very intense because I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of this pain. I'm afraid of experiencing it. There's a story going on in my head right now about this pain, and it is making it feel very intense for me. There are some things that you can begin to say to yourself, and you can come up with your own phrases. These are some that I use that help to empower you in the experience of pain. Saying things like, this is pain. Pain is a normal part of my human experience. Pain is part of life that I want to experience. Pain is not going to kill me. But what is hiding under it could if I don't take the time to listen. I can listen to pain. I can experience pain and it will not harm me. I have the ability to be present and listen with pain. I am a human being and I am made to experience pain. I am designed to process pain. Pain is here to show me something important that I want to see. It is important for me. I can feel pain all of the way through the process. I am safe in feeling pain. After you've gotten yourself to the point where you allow yourself to see that this fearing of pain and making pain a problem is really the only problem with pain, and you can begin to use these phrases of empowerment in your pain and allow yourself to, instead of immediately jumping into that fight, flight, or freeze response when it comes to your pain, when you're allowing yourself to be in your pain and say these things to yourself, empower yourself to be present with your pain, then we want to switch to the next step in processing our pain. And I call that being the observer of your pain. And this is a very powerful place to be in. Once you've de-escalated the fear experience of the pain and you're able to be in it, we can actually de-intensify the vibration of the pain by being in the position of the observer of the pain. And here's how we sort of shift into that experience of being the observer of the pain, is that we recognize that there is this human experience. There is the brain, and then there is us, who we are on the inside. Existing in this life through that human experience and through that body and through the brain's experience of pain, we are there and we can watch it all taking place. We can literally watch our human experience of pain. So the first thing you want to do is name it. Name it. Say, in this human experience, there is pain right now. I am watching the presence of pain in this human experience. I am here with that human experience and with that pain, and I'm watching it. I'm watching it happen right now. Once you have named the presence of that pain, you want to begin to describe it in as much detail as you can. I always tell my clients to imagine that there's like an extraterrestrial in front of you, some being from another planet or from maybe even another universe, and they don't understand the experience of pain. Pain is not something that they experience. And they're curious about it. They want you to know. They want to know, like, what is this thing you're talking about? So I want you to describe it in that much detail to yourself. Even write it down if you want to. But I would say, just close your eyes and describe it to yourself. Be in that position of the observer, watching your human experience of there being pain present, and describe it. Where do you feel it in the body? What does it feel like in your brain? What sensations do you feel? Right now, this pain feels like it's sitting in the lower part of my stomach. It feels sharp. It feels deep. It feels heavy and hot. It feels like it's just going to always be there and never go away. And I am watching it just be there. I feel myself not wanting to breathe around it in hopes to escape the feeling of it. I can feel myself tingling with anticipation of it getting worse. Really describe it for yourself. I can feel that. This is what it feels like for me. And once you have described it, and you feel yourself having shifted to that position of being the observer of that emotion of fear surrounding the pain, the observer of experiencing or watching yourself experience the pain, I want you to begin practicing telling yourself that it's okay to breathe into this emotional experience and allow it the space to be there. I want you to speak it to yourself. Not just do it. I want you to speak it to yourself that you are allowing the pain to be there. You are inviting it and welcoming it to be present in your experience right now that you are observing. You are open to feeling it, to describing it, to breathing deeply into the feeling of it. And as you do this, I want you to note the way it vibrates in your body as you breathe into it and ask it to feel welcome and to have its space, to say what it's here to say. And that takes me to the next step, is that I want you to start asking your pain from the space of curiosity. What is it that you want to show me? What are you here to show me? What is it in my thinking and beliefs that's really important for me right now? What do I need to give my attention to? When you ask this, a certain thought may come forward. And as it comes forward, you may notice the intensity of the pain vibration increasing again. This is okay. This is okay. Go back to your empowered phrases about pain, your ability to welcome it, your ability to be with it. I want you to breathe into this newly developing intensity of vibration of pain as you bring these thoughts forward. And welcome it with space to be present with you. Remember that you have fear surrounding this pain, and that's normal. But you're allowing that fear while you also allow the pain itself to be present. You're breathing deeply into and expanding into the human experience of this fear and pain. You are human and you are designed to experience this. And as you do this, these thoughts are going to come forward. They're going to become clear to you. Thoughts that maybe you're going to want to immediately want to dismiss and be like, oh, that's dumb. I shouldn't be thinking that. Don't do that. Allow the thoughts to come forward. I don't want you to resist. This is all about awareness and acceptance here. And as those thoughts come forward, the next thing I want you to do is some journaling about the thinking that came forward surrounding that pain. We're not judging that thinking, but I want you to journal about what thoughts and beliefs really came forward for you and grabbed your attention surrounding this experience of emotional pain. Write them down. Write them down. And I want you to answer these questions about these thoughts or beliefs. I want you to ask yourself, why am I wanting to think or believe this? This is important for me. There is a reason why this is important for me. Why am I wanting to think or believe this? How does this thought or belief appear to serve me or protect me in some way? This is the reason why I want it to be here, why I've been keeping it around. Remind yourself in this process, because your brain's going to want to go into automatically, oh, well, that's dumb. It's because you're stupid and broken. You shouldn't be thinking these thoughts. It's going to want to dismiss, and it's going to want to judge and reject these thoughts. I want you to remind yourself that you don't do things without a good reason. You are always doing the best you can. So these thoughts were created as the best you could at the time you created them. So I want you to ask yourself with total compassion and openness and honesty, why did I want to think this thought? Why did I want to keep it around for so long? Don't let your brain trick you into I don't know or dismissing or saying I'm just crazy or dumb or whatever adjective you want. I want you to ask the brain, to let you know how this thought or belief is serving to protect you. Then I want you to begin to consider and write down the answer to this. What are the costs that this protection has been creating in my life? What costs have I been incurring due to this payoff of this belief or thought? How am I moving further from the life that I truly want by following this thought and belief and taking on these costs in my life by believing this belief and thought? When you do this, I want to be clear. The goal here is not to escape pain. The goal is also not to judge or reject or to shame yourself. When you do this, you are processing pain. You are moving fully through it to the other side. And in the process, you are softening and changing the vibration of pain as you move through it because you're not resisting it. And by doing so, you remove the suffering of experiencing pain. And the more times you do this, you'll begin to notice that your capacity to be present with the pain increases. And as you notice this, I want you to begin to give yourself space to truly consider just how much you're willing to be fully present with your human experience, including the part of pain. What would be different in your life if you were willing to practice courage with your pain and step into it when fear is present? What things would you be doing now that would move you forward into the life that you truly want to be living if you were willing to step forward into pain with compassion, with patience, with presence, instead of avoiding it or trying to rush through it? What things would you be doing now to move you towards that life that you truly want, that you haven't been doing, if you stepped into pain in that way? I want you to journal about this. I want you to journal regularly about this idea. Is pain really a problem for me? Ask yourself that. Do I want to release this problematic story that I have for myself surrounding pain? And how much I don't want to experience it? How much would my life change and open up if I was willing to let go of this story surrounding pain? Because again, you see, when we fear emotional pain, we let the fear control us, instead of taking our emotional responsibility and power back. And then we allow fear to create actions of resistance in our life. We seek to avoid the emotional pain and resist it and constantly escape it through temporary patches and distractions and numbing behaviors, and trying to rush through and change the thinking without first understanding the thinking and the purpose that it was there to serve in the first place, and how we can serve that purpose in a more aligned way. And when we allow the fear of pain to control us, what we do is we actually begin to close doors in our life in an attempt to reduce the possibility of emotional pain. But remember that emotional pain comes from inside. It comes from your own thinking and your own beliefs. So you're closing all of these doors in your life and making the world around you smaller and smaller, and less is left in your world until all that's left is yourself and your thinking that is creating the pain in the first place. So literally, when we do not allow pain in our lives, when we try to resist it, when we try to avoid it, we literally shrink our lives into this ball where the only thing left in it is the pain. But here's the thing, when we accept pain, when we move into it with open and welcoming and inviting arms, and we know that the pain itself cannot hurt us, it is only a thought that we are having that can hurt us. When we see that, and when we see that we are designed to experience pain because it benefits us, we learn from it, we grow from it, then what we end up doing is we open our lives up to opportunity. We don't eliminate the pain, but what we do in the process of saying yes to pain is we open those doors that we've closed. We expand our world to so much more possibility and opportunity, and we appreciate more in the world, in this 50-50, the 50% good, the 50% ouch. This 50-50 becomes something we powerfully step into. We have deeper appreciation for the 50% good. We have less suffering with the 50% ouch. And we empower ourselves to become these unstoppable beings and being able to process the full human experience. The worst that can happen is an emotion that you process, a feeling that you process. It's coming from a thought. And when we open ourselves up to that and say yes to it, we become these badasses that are able to process the human experience so much more fully. And we open our lives up to so much more possibility. So the last thing that I would recommend that you do when it comes to, if you're wanting to learn to step into and process and accept your emotional pain instead of running away from it, avoiding it, and trying to get, the last thing that I would tell you to do is to work with a coach. And I know that I am a coach, so it seems obvious that I would recommend this. May seem like a conflict of interest, but I'm doing this because I know that it works. I want you to find a coach who is not interested in hurrying you out of your pain, but is interested in showing you your authentic way through processing the pain and coming out on the other side more aware, more open, with more courage and strength, and ready for your full human experience. So I want you to find a coach. I'm here for anyone who's ready, that wants to take that path through their pain and not around it or away from it. So feel free to reach out. All of my contact information is in the show notes. You've got my email, my website, my Instagram, my Facebook group. Reach out. So that's all I've got today for you all, my friends. I know that accepting pain sounds like a hard sell, but remember that accepting pain is not about liking it. It's not about wanting to keep creating it. It's about recognizing that it is a part of life. And the more we resist it, the more suffering we create. But the more we invite it into our lives with excitement, because we take our dominion back over pain, and we recognize, I am a human, I am designed to experience and process pain. I can feel that. I can process it all the way through and come out on the other side knowing myself, loving myself even more deeply than I thought was possible. Pain is only a problem when we choose to label it as such. So pain, bring it on. I'm ready and I'm willing. Acceptance is about this. It's not about resignation or weakness by giving up when it comes to pain. It's about actively choosing to be with your pain, to look at it and say, yes, I want you in my life. Come on, bring it on, and take it in the processing of it with empowerment. And like I said, get excited about all the things that you're going to learn about yourself and life as you begin to allow yourself to open up to possibilities that before you were shutting doors to because you were so afraid of experiencing a thought that was going to create some emotional pain. If you got some rejection, or if you got a no, or if someone said something to you about something that you did. Acceptance is about taking your power back here and opening those doors again. And you will become unstoppable in showing up in this life to create the life that you are truly designed to be here living, not the one you've been living because you're hiding behind doors. Up until now, you've been resisting a whole entire 50% of your life. And all that's doing is causing you suffering and a ton of loss of energy. With acceptance of pain, you are stepping into all of that with power now, allowing that energy to flow freely through you and into your life as you step into the full human experience with openness. I promise this is something that you want to experience in your life. I know it might seem like it's not something that you want to experience from your current perspective, but recognize this is coming from fear and resistance. And I want to encourage you that if this podcast spoke to you and you notice something in you perking up and being like, I want to listen, I don't know, but I want to listen, I want to encourage you to not silence or dismiss that voice in avoidance of fear or of pain. I want you to try leaning in here. Try it differently this time. Lean into that little voice. Don't dismiss it. Don't just shut off the episode and walk away and try and forget about this. I want you to lean into that voice that perked up when you were listening here. And I'm here to hold your hand and guide you through the process of leaning in and finding out what strength you have when you do so. All right? I love you all. I'm going to leave this 3-part series here on emotional pain. There's so much more that we could talk about. These podcast episodes are not designed to show you all of the ways that this applies uniquely to your lives individually. So I understand this is a very simplified overview. And so you're going to have thoughts, you're going to have questions, you're going to have frustrations about this topic. That's a great thing. I want you to reach out with those. I'm here as a coach to show you your unique process in this. I think that many times people see books and podcasts as being a substitute for working with someone on these things. But what I want to offer here is that this podcast, this book, this is maybe 1% of what I do on an individual basis with someone. So reach out. This is not a substitute for that. And if you feel frustrated, if you have questions, it's not because the podcast didn't do what it's supposed to do. If you have thoughts and questions, it did exactly what it's supposed to do. So reach out. All right, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. I wish you a weekend of moving into your emotional pain with empowerment and courage. Okay? I know you all truly want this on the inside, and I can't wait until you begin to see that fully. So I wish you all a wonderful weekend full of this empowerment and courage. And until next Thursday when we meet here again, ciao. Hey, thank you for listening in this week. I hope you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you did, please subscribe or follow this podcast to receive the newest episodes every week as I bring them to you here on the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. Ratings, reviews, and comments are always appreciated. These allow me to know more of what my listeners would like in the podcast and allow for more people who may be searching for a podcast just like this one to find the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. If you would like more information about me and the work that I do with my clients one-on-one, then please visit my website at www.slch.ch. Again, that is www.slch.ch. You can also find me on social media on Instagram at SethLusk_coaching. Again, that is SethLusk_coaching. And on Facebook in my free Facebook group community called A Healthy Life Connection. We would love to have you in the group, and it's only 3 membership questions that you have to answer to join. And again, it's entirely free. And if you need any further information or just want to say hello, feel free to send me an email directly at slusk.health@slch.ch. Again, that is slusk.health@slch.ch. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to our next time together. Ciao.